The shovel didn't just strike dirt, it struck something far more consequential. A sudden hiss filled the air as pressurized water burst upward, drenching the worker's neon vest in a muddy spray and knocking his hard hat sideways. In a flash, a geyser of water shot sky high, splattering across the clipboard held by a woman in oversized sunglasses and an aggressively pink visor. That woman was Lorraine Parker, president of the Hawthorne Ridge Homeowners Association, a title she wielded like a medieval scepter. And at that moment, Lorraine had absolutely no idea that she had just declared war on the wrong neighbor. 20 feet away, I stood frozen, a garden hose dangling from my hand, helplessly watching as a ragtag crew, without warning or permission, ripped open my carefully manicured front lawn like they were searching for buried treasure. They were slashing through my irrigation system with the gusto of a demolition team ordered to clear jungle. But what Lorraine didn't know, and what would soon become her undoing, was that I had a legally recorded easement and a secret backup irrigation line that ran directly beneath their prized community walkway. It all started 3 days earlier, when I first noticed the west side of my lawn looked suspiciously dry. At first, I assumed it was a clogged sprinkler head or a malfunctioning timer. I tinkered with the controller, checked valves, replaced a few sprinkler heads, but nothing revived the brown patches. I decided to follow the irrigation line, tracing it along the property's edge near a so-called community buffer zone managed by the HOA. That's when I saw a fresh trench, spray-painted markings on the grass, and deep tire tracks gouged into the soil. And standing squarely in the center of the chaos was Lorraine herself, barking orders to 2 workers in fluorescent shirts, directing them as if she were leading a battlefield excavation. No contractor badges, no permits, no notices, just a clipboard and a heavy dose of self-importance. I approached carefully, trying to keep my voice even. "Excuse me, what exactly are you doing here?" Lorraine barely spared me a glance. "You've installed unauthorized underground utilities encroaching on HOA land," she said, her tone clipped and dismissive. "We're removing them. Consider this a courtesy." I pointed to the property line marker, then pulled out the original survey map I kept in the garage, neatly laminated. "This is my easement," I said calmly. "It's legally recorded. You're digging on my property." She smirked and waved her clipboard dismissively. "This is a community buffer zone. If you have concerns, feel free to submit them in writing to the board." And with that, she turned her back on me. The next morning, my yard looked like a war zone. Trenches crisscrossed through my flower beds. A pond of muddy water pooled against my boxwoods. Drip lines were slashed, flower mulch tossed aside like trash. But worst of all, the crew had severed not only my sprinkler system, but also the critical drainage line that carried runoff away from my retaining wall during storms, a wall that could collapse if left unsupported. That night, under the dim glow of the dining room chandelier, I pulled out an old banker's box filled with documents I hadn't touched in years. Inside, carefully filed, was a notarized utility easement dated 1996, long before the HOA even existed, granting me perpetual rights to install and maintain irrigation and runoff systems across the buffer zone. And better yet, the document included a golden clause. In the event that the primary line was damaged, I had the right to activate a backup route under the adjacent HOA-maintained sidewalk. I laughed out loud. Lorraine had unknowingly triggered the very clause that would allow me to outmaneuver her. The next morning, I approached her with the easement in hand. "You've made a serious mistake," I said politely. She glanced at the document like it was a piece of used gum. "Our landscaping guidelines supersede old claims," she said with a sneer. "We've already issued you a compliance fine. $2,500. I accepted the fine slip with a smile. "Perfect," I said. "I'll add it to the lawsuit." That afternoon, I called my friend Travis, a contractor who owed me a big favor after I rescued his crashed hard drive last year. Together, we used a ground-penetrating radar scanner to locate the backup irrigation line, a perfect, intact system running silently beneath Lorraine's precious brick sidewalk. "You really want to do this?" Travis asked with a grin. Without hesitation, I answered, "Absolutely." By sunset, My lawn was green and thriving again, fed entirely by the backup line, completely hidden from view. No trenches, no hoses, no visible signs of rebellion. Just healthy grass, watered legally through a pipe Lorraine had unknowingly authorized by violating the original line. Days passed, and Lorraine grew increasingly furious. She fined me again, this time for unauthorized water usage, accusing me of tapping into community utilities. I framed that fine next to my easement paperwork and hung it proudly in my garage. But Lorraine wasn't done. She barricaded the sidewalk with beautification zone signs, bright caution tape, and fake construction notices, trying to cover her mistakes by pretending a massive landscaping project was underway. Except there were no flowers, no landscaping, just a roped-off mess that attracted attention from every passerby. Neighbors began whispering. Why were trenches dug without warning? Why hadn't there been a community vote? Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into grumbles. Lorraine panicked and doubled down, accusing me of siphoning HOA water illegally. She even showed up with a flustered compliance officer named Stewart, demanding to inspect my irrigation controls. I smiled warmly and said, "Come back with a court order and a certified utility inspector. Otherwise, have a nice day." Lorraine's face flushed an angry shade of crimson. She stormed off, but not before hissing, "This isn't over." She was right, it wasn't. Because the next morning, the sidewalk she so desperately tried to protect began to sag. Water had slowly eroded the backfill beneath the bricks thanks to her unauthorized trenching. A jagged crack appeared, creeping like a spider's web across the surface. By week's end, the damage was undeniable. A child riding a scooter tripped over the uneven pavement. The county had to tape off the area, declaring it a hazard zone. At the next HOA meeting, the room boiled over with outrage. Residents demanded answers. Where were the permits? Why had money been spent without approval? How did this happen? Lorraine squirmed under the questions, flinging desperate accusations at me. He sabotaged the project. He's exploiting loopholes. I calmly stood and laid down the evidence. The easement, the survey, photos of Lorraine's illegal dig, the notarized documents, the video footage of her unauthorized midnight repairs. Silence filled the room. A vote was called. Lorraine was suspended from the board. A formal inquiry into HOA mismanagement was launched. The board approached me with a simple request. Would I be willing to negotiate a settlement to avoid escalating into a full-blown lawsuit? I agreed on one condition: mandatory utility and land easement training for all future board members. They accepted. Construction crews with official permits repaired the sidewalk, professionally restoring the damage Lorraine had caused. New access panels were installed. Utility lines were clearly marked, and my irrigation system was upgraded courtesy of HOA funds. When the work finished, the community gathered for a small celebration on my lawn. Neighbors shook my hand, thanked me for standing up, even gifted me homemade pies and garden tools. Lorraine's name disappeared from the HOA newsletter without fanfare. She moved 2 towns over to a community without an HOA. Irony has a sense of humor sometimes. The battle hadn't been about revenge. It had been about standing your ground, protecting what's yours, refusing to be bullied by a clipboard. In my garden now stands a small, simple sculpture, a coiled steel hose rising into a clenched fist holding a spade. Beneath it, on a plaque, it reads, "Defend what's yours. Water finds its way." Lorraine's attempts to rewrite history faded into nothing. The sidewalk stands firm. The grass thrives. And the easement, once invisible, now runs proudly underfoot, a quiet, permanent reminder that persistence always wins.